The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. It would help if I turned the camera on, wouldn't it? Howdy, everybody. Come to your cordless from Minneapolis. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 12 noon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Time. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. Episode number 203, if you're keeping score at home. And in Minneapolis, and believe it or not, it's going to snow tonight. Who would have thought that in March? Unbelievable. Yeah. The thing is, we're exactly on the 45th parallel. As a matter of fact, Broadway, we're at around the corner of Broadway and Central in Northeast Minneapolis. Broadway goes east to west and is exactly on the 45th parallel. They did that on purpose. They missed by about 500 feet, but it was the 1880s. What did they know? So, and the thing, for that reason, I don't know if that's the reason, we get kind of weird weather patterns here. Well, the whole Minnesota thing's weird, weather-wise, but we got a lot of times storms like divide the city. So we're either going to get 1 inch of snow or 7 inches, and we don't know what. They don't know, because I know down south they're going to get slammed for sure. But anyway, I like you care. But the thing is, I live here and it fascinates me, and I hate winter. I hate it. You've heard me talk about this many times. It's like 8 months of the year, wonderful year, winter, 4 months of the year, sucks. But we're almost over it. Not only that, it's been pretty warm lately. We've had today it's in the 50s again. We have no snow on the ground at all. Haven't for a couple weeks. Absolutely none. It's all gone. But that's going to end tonight. But my guess is it's supposed to be pretty warm. I guess that'll be gone in a few days too. Our guest tonight is Marcus Lowth. He's the editor-in-chief of UFO Insight magazine and website on the web. He's a UFO reporter and writer. He writes a lot. The guy is, I told him this, we started the interview in this, we pre-recorded it, and I got some notes on that in a second too. After I booked him for this interview, I started to see his articles everywhere. It's like, the man gets around, man. He knows his stuff too. Pretty fascinating. Stick around for this. You'll like it. Now, speaking of pre-recording, we're doing something different tonight that we've never done before. It's our 2 1/3 show. We often do record interviews ahead of time. We do that, but usually we do the show live. Tonight's entire show is pre-recorded. We're recorded in the afternoon for several reasons. Also, partly because this was a good time to just try it. We've never done this before. So we're not taking any calls tonight. The call ticker is down on the bottom of the screen. You can't call in. This is a pre-recorded show. We're actually not live. So although this is being posted, it will run live at 9 p.m. Eastern. It will. But the show itself isn't live. So it's kind of like the Tonight Show. They typed that at 5:30 in the afternoon, and we're kind of doing the same thing. I don't know if we're going to make a habit of this. I don't. I actually just want to try it. We have the ability to schedule pre-recorded shows, so that's what we're doing here. We've never done it before. It's kind of an experiment. But anyway, but like I said, about half of our interviews, if not more, in the past have been pre-recorded. Mostly it's to make it convenient for our interview subjects. And Marcus, bless his heart, is coming to us from England. So this worked out quite well too. We had no trouble with the connection, no trouble with sync, nothing. It worked out very, very well. But so it's 7 o'clock. We taped that at 1 o'clock Central, and it's 7 o'clock in Southwick, London. So it worked out good. So, at any rate, yeah, so he's our guest tonight. Now, we have a full slate of shows this week, and not only that, we got a show on Friday, too, which don't do very often. Once again, I'm doing this accommodate a guest of ours, and I thought, well, we could hold it over to Monday, but screw it. You know, it's not even really time sensitive. I thought, what the hell? Let's do a show on Friday. We've done it before. We don't do very often. So tonight we got Marcus Lowth. Tomorrow, Jeff Meyer, CEO and publisher of Conk News. He joined us. We're talking about business and politics. Thursday, Nathan Wooster from the Epoch Times. He's joined us a few times in the past. He's both an energy reporter and a congressional reporter, politics reporter at the Epoch Times. He's going to join us. He's in Chicago, I think. I don't know if that's where he's joining us from. But yeah, he's coming on Thursday. Friday, Lee Richardson. She's the founder and head of the Brain Performance Center in Dallas, Texas. She's a psychologist. She's joining us. The actual specific topic of conversation is going to be sports addiction sports betting addiction among young men. But I already told her I want to talk about some stuff. There's a survey that came out recently that said this blows my mind. And if you watched the show before, you understand where I'm coming from here. Survey said that 60% of all American men say they don't have any friends. That's nuts. That's crazy. You'll go crazy. You will. I'm astonished by how many people don't socialize with anybody. This is not right, folks. And we got to talk about that because if you think the country's going to hell, that might be ultimately be the underlying reason. It might. It's like people do not. I'm an old fart. And the thing is, so what's different now than 50 years ago is, and people forget about this. We've quickly started to take this for granted. 50 years ago, if you wanted anything, you had to leave the house. I'm not just talking about food or groceries. You wanted entertainment, you had to leave the house. Television was in its relative infancy. Nothing really on the TV. There were 4 channels. You wanted any entertainment or anything, you left the house. And so because of that, the downtowns of most cities, even small cities, the one I grew up in, were usually hopping. Now nobody goes out for anything, especially now since COVID. This was inevitable, but COVID ended up speeding this process up greatly. Now you don't have to leave the house for work either. A lot of people, now what's going to happen here, and I want to talk about with Jeff tomorrow night. They just sold Wells Fargo Center, which is one of the tallest buildings in downtown Minneapolis, 60 stories. Also one of the most beautiful skyscrapers in the United States, designed by Cesar Pelli, inspired by 30 Rock in New York City. It's modern Art Deco, and it's arguably, and I think everyone agrees, it's the single most beautiful skyscraper in downtown Minneapolis. It got sold recently for $85 million. And for a 60-story building, that's chump change. 4 years ago, it went for $500 million. It went for $500 million. And it just got sold 4 years later for 85. Why? Because nobody's going to be coming downtown anymore. Because 2/3 of America works at home. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have people moving out of major cities and basically mid-sized cities. Because, the west of here, the nearest major city of any size is Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And that only has about 250,000 people in it. There's 3.5 million people in the Twin Cities metro here. And Jeff and I have talked about this too. We're in how it affects politics in Minnesota. There's 5 to 6 million people. I guess it's gone up to 6 million people in Minnesota. Over half of them are in the metro area. Over half. So we call it outstate here. There's not a lot of people out in the rural. And so then you go west of here, the first major city is Sioux Falls. It's only 250,000 people. But why live in Minneapolis when you're working at home? What's the point? Sioux Falls is going to do just fine. And that's what's going to happen. We're going to have you're going to have people moving to it's already started, folks. I don't have to tell you, this, So along with that, people don't leave the house. And so people don't socialize. So if you don't have a family or you hate your family, which that's another thing too I want to talk to Lee about, I've said this in the past. If your father raped you, I understand why you don't want to talk to him. But that's a minority for most people. Most people don't talk to their family because of really petty, stupid things, And my basic advice to you is get over it. I can't. You need to socialize with your family more than you need to put up a fight about some stupid, petty BS stuff that happened 30 years ago or whatever. But like I said, I know that's not everybody. I know that, but it's the majority of people. It is. Anyway, we're going to talk to Lee on Friday. So we're doing a Friday show. We're also going to do it in a couple of weeks too. I can't remember the name of the woman. We've booked on. We have a guest in 2 weeks from Friday too, and it's the same thing. I accommodated her by going on Friday, and we're just going to do a Friday show. Screw it. We don't know. So Marcus Lowth is coming up in just a second here. We're going to do a commercial for Kong News, and then we'll talk to Marcus. Here we go. Hi, all. I want to talk to you about Conch News. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but if you're a news junkie, you should try this out. Conch News is a news aggregator. Now, there are plenty of news aggregators on the web, but Conch News is different than all the rest, and here's how. Most other news aggregators will lump the top stories from each news source under that news source. The top 10 stories, like, for example, from Fox News, Breitbart, the New York Post, etc. What Conch News does is it sends its servers out onto the web to over 75 different news sources every 3 hours. And yes, this is an automated process, but in this case, that's actually a good thing. And collects the latest stories from said 75 sources and then lays them out on its own front page in the order they were posted, regardless of the source. So you see the latest stories at the top of the front page, regardless of where they're from. And this is all free to you. You don't need to log in. You don't need to subscribe, register, nothing. It's completely free. All you have to do is go to conch.com to check it out. That's conch.com, CONK.com, conch.com, Conch News. Joining us from his office in Yorkshire, England, Marcus Lowth, who's the editor-in-chief of UFO Insight, among other things. How are you doing today, Marcus?
I'm good, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
So here's the deal. I talked to you, and all of a sudden, since we booked this interview, I've been seeing your name everywhere. I didn't realize how many different publications you write for. It's really quite astonishing. What is it? Half a dozen? I mean,
probably about half a dozen. UFO Insight, Me Time for the Mind, Mysterious Universe, obviously. Listverse. I've done a few things for them. I've written a few podcasts of Peter Law's, Into the Fog, Somewhere in the Skies. I've written some things for them. So yeah, I like to write and I like the subject. So yeah, I try to get into as many places as I can.
So did you just get into this crazy business because you're obsessed with the subject? How do you do this?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I can't sit here and say that, some people get into it if they have a particular experience, for example. Now, I have seen some strange things, but it was essentially, I've always had a love of writing, first and foremost, going back, to being a kid. But I've also always been interested in anything to do with the unexplained, mysteries, ancient mysteries, UFOs in particular. But when I started researching UFOs, I started finding myself going down avenues I didn't think I would, such as ancient mysteries and things of that nature, and the other aspects of the paranormal. It's a subject that just takes you, like I say, that into places that you haven't even thought about before. So yeah, pretty much, I researched all this stuff, for about a decade, and then I took the plunge into writing and put Me Time for the Mind, started working for UFO Insights, and the rest is history, so to say.
So did you come to the conclusion that me and a lot of other people seem to have come to too, including like John Mack, the late John Mack, and that is you get into this and you start to realize that the circumstantial evidence is absolutely overwhelming. Is that the conclusion you've drawn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and more than that, I think as I alluded to before, it makes you see things that you hadn't previously thought about. To most people, if you speak about UFOs, for example, they think about aliens and they think about coming from outer space. The more I've researched this, and I know other researchers and investigators have come to similar conclusions, is that it's going to be a lot more nuanced than that. And there's so much evidence to suggest, for example, that these aliens, for want of a better word, are interdimensional beings. They could also be indigenous to the planet. That such bizarre theories as the inner Earth and things of that nature. So yeah, it starts off. It starts off as you're thinking one thing, but it leads you somewhere completely different, and it's constantly evolving. Everything's in flux right now as we await disclosure. Which I don't necessarily think is ever going to happen. Not how people hope for. But yeah, it's just such a fascinating subject, and it's very real. Now, whether it is aliens or whatever remains to be seen, but it's very real. These people are experiencing these things and who are seeing these objects in the sky. It's not just people. It's not just a bunch of crazies, they've got real stories to tell. And I think that's something that's often overlooked, incidentally, is the human aspect to it and how it affects people's lives and when they find themselves wrapped up in these kind of encounters.
So, my late great friend Jazz Shaw, who passed away in October, he also wrote for Mysterious Universe, and he was connected to the Pentagon. He was on the show on a regular basis. And the thing I got from him, and it's unfortunate, now I have no connection to the Pentagon, but the thing that he was talking about with his inside scoop there, that is, you're talking about the interdimensional beings, or the fact that maybe this isn't just like hardware flying to Earth. And
Yeah.
he said that the people in the Pentagon he was talking to said they don't want to talk about this because they don't think the public can handle it. Do you think that, or do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think as you say, I think a lot of people suspect, for example, that the reason, if we accept for a minute that governments are holding back and they have got information that they're not divulging, most people would accept that that's to do with national security, physical machines and technologies that could fall into the wrong hands and things of that nature. But I suspect, as you say, I think it'll be truly reality altering for people. If we ever do manage to get to the heart of the truth of what is behind UFOs and aliens and things of that nature, because I think it will reveal things such as other dimensions. I mean, mainstream science is already speaking about this. They're already looking into the fact that there are portals that possibly exist, around the Earth, possibly on the Earth. So it's not as bizarre as people might think. I don't know if you remember. I think it was Tucker Carlson that was speaking. I think it was on Fox News a few months back, and he was talking about, governments were saying, or a government insider, should I say, was telling him that there was a demonic aspect to this, or what we would understand as demonic, and that's something that's been floating around in UFO circles for years. So it really does make you wonder what exactly they know, and I do think a part of it may be that it would just prove to be quite reality shattering for many people.
I probably don't have to tell you this. One of the other things Jazz talked about, and I didn't have to talk to him to know this, that there's a big struggle in the Pentagon in the United States right now about the fact, like you were saying, there's a lot of people who think the subject is just plain evil, and they don't want to talk about it. It's like, and so Nick Pope from your country, great. I've never met the guy or talked to him. Seems like a great individual, but he said recently, and I thought this was really in some podcast somewhere, he said recently that he was all for disclosure to the public and the world until COVID happened. And then he realized, well, we couldn't handle COVID. How can we handle this? Your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting thing because I've always argued, whenever I've been asked this, that the public certainly can handle the truth. You're obviously going to get pockets of people that either just flat won't be able to handle it, or they'll twist it to suit their own agenda. But generally speaking, I've always believed that people would take things much more in the stride than they're giving credit for. However, COVID is a good example, I suppose. That and it wasn't just one way or the other. You had people who were being ultra cautious on the one side, people who were just throwing caution to the wind on the other, and yeah, it makes you wonder. I mean, whether that's justification, however, for keeping things ultra locked down, I'm not sure. But going back to what you mentioned about, this idea that there's an evil that surrounds this kind of stuff. It's probably very true. I mean, and then you have to start thinking about, well, what is evil? I mean, obviously that's going to be different things to different people. But it's another good example, I think, of how different areas of interest come together. Because when you look at kind of ancient legends that speak of evil and the devils and demons and things of that nature, when you read a lot of those from a modern perspective, they could very well be talking about UFOs, aliens, beings from other dimensions. So this kind of stuff could have been documented for thousands and thousands of years. It's just from what perspective we look at those kind of things. But yeah, I still would like to think that the public could handle, a disclosure of information. I generally don't think that'll happen anyway. But yeah, it's an interesting point by Nick, because there's probably a little bit of truth in that.
I don't know if you wrote this article or someone else did. I read so much I can't even remember. Did you write an article recently about the Vatican archives?
I don't know one about the Vatican archives. I did mention the Vatican though in I think it was in the disclosure article for Mysterious Universe. But I'm relatively familiar with the notion that they've got documents, that could have all manner of information on there. And again, these are going back thousands of years. Who knows what's in there? It's certainly extensive. In terms of UFOs, I suppose what you've got to think there is the Vatican, had close connections to the Third Reich, obviously Mussolini's regime during the Second World War. A lot of those documents would have gone to the United States through Operation Paperclip, and lots of the knowledge with the scientists that were transplanted there. But it's not out of the question that they could have, through whatever means, have documentation, files on some of the Third Reich, flying disc programs. I mean, there's rumors, David Grush alluded to a UFO crash in Italy in 1933. Well, there's rumors that there was a crash in Germany in the Black Forest in 1936. And there's also, documentation. I think it was Robert Pinotti and Alfredo Lissoni, the Italian UFO investigators, that they kind of highlighted that there was evidence of some kind of program between the Third Reich and Mussolini's regime looking at advanced technologies. So yeah, the Vatican could certainly have information on that. And I would be surprised if they haven't. They've certainly got information on their take on UFOs, because over the past decade, especially, that they've alluded to their interest in the possibility of life existing elsewhere outside of the Earth. So it's almost another way of them drip feeding what they know to the public, in the same way that possibly governments are doing.
You were talking about the crashes in Italy in 33 and the crash in Germany in 36. Do you think there's any chance? I don't really. I mean, I've read a lot about this, but I don't really have an opinion. I can't really tell. Do you think there's any chance that Nazis did actually reverse engineer some of that technology? After all, they did lose the war. You'd think if they'd done that, they'd won.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because there's all sorts of conspiracies surrounding the Third Reich, and you've got to treat them all with caution. They certainly did have a flying disc program, the Hannibal Project, I think it was called. So I suppose what you've got here is we either accept that the Third Reich, for whatever reason, we're just highly ahead of the rest of the world. And when the Second World War started, that was certainly the case. I mean, they had hardware on the battlefield that people just hadn't seen before, really. And I suppose initially, like, they were going to steamroll their way through everything. Now, some people say that because they became, the hierarchy of the Third Reich became obsessed with this technology, that wanted to develop a wonder weapon that would end the war. And as you say, that clearly didn't happen. But they kind of diverted, some people say, so much funds and resources and concentration into these advanced technologies that they kind of, took the foot off the gas, basically.
Yeah, right.
On the actual battlefield. So they could have either just been highly advanced. I believe, I can't remember the guy's name. It was Otto somebody, so forgive my ignorance there. But he basically said, when he was asked, how did you get so far ahead? He said, we had help.
Yeah.
He alluded to the help came from out there. So yeah, it's possible. You've just got to treat these things with caution. I mean, there's lots of disinformation floating around now. That goes right back to the end of the Second World War. There's certainly lots of Soviet Union disinformation fed into the West, taking advantage of claims of seeing UFOs. So you've got to treat it all with caution. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility. They certainly were highly advanced. And just one more thing: the Italian aviation industry. When the First World War ended, it was practically bottom. In terms of their ability and their technology. When the Second World War began, they were just one of the the best performing. They had some of the most advanced fighters. So where did that leap come from? Again, is it just human ingenuity, or did they reverse engineer technologies? I mean, the rumored building where that UFO was stored, much like lots of places in Berlin, suffered no damage whatsoever during the war, despite repeated bombing campaigns. So whether that's just pure dumb luck, or whether that was off limits to the Allies, it just raises further questions of that nature.
I'm just going straight ahead here. I got a lot of friends and people watch the show. The common question is, if this technology coming from outer space is so advanced, why do they keep crashing? And now I have some thoughts on this, but I'm interviewing you. What do you think?
Again, there's several theories on it, really, isn't there? I mean, I think that the one that I found most plausible, and again, this is if we accept that these vehicles are traveling through space, which they're probably not. I mean, if these intelligences, whatever they are coming from another planet, outer space, they're probably using portals and wormholes and things of that nature. But the explanation I found most plausible was that these vehicles use some kind. They say, I don't know where this information comes from, Bob Lazar, people like that. They use some kind of anti-gravity technology, and the best way to explain that is if you say put a stone on a piece of paper, and then you get the stones there, you get a piece of paper, you bring the other sheet underneath it, and then stretch it out, and the stone goes with it. Okay, so you've basically created a wormhole, essentially. And that's how these machines move through space and through wormholes and things like that. But when they come to Earth, the gravity is completely different, and this is why apparently these advanced vehicles are crash landing. And when you add into that as well, that a lot of these crashes tend to happen where there's electromagnetic faults, UFO hotspots are in these areas too. So that could play a part in interfering with this technology. But yeah, it's a plausible question, as you say, if they are so advanced, etc. But on the other side of that, we might ask, well, how often are these vehicles in our skies?
That's my point. Yeah, go ahead. You're absolutely right. That's what I think too. I think one of the reasons is because we've vastly underestimated the number of the stuff that's flying around in our atmosphere. I think that we're inundated with this and we don't even know it. That's my personal feeling. So you just go off of statistics, some of them are going to crash. The other thing that I've heard too, which makes a lot of sense to me, is that our radar system, which is prehistoric to them, actually screws up their equipment. And of course, if you think about it from their point of view, if they're 10,000 years ahead of us, they're not anticipating any bullshit radar. I mean, they aren't, So they come to Earth and all of a sudden they end up with bullshit radar, and all of a sudden it makes their navigation go screwy. It's like that. I think that's plausible. But
yeah, absolutely.
So you've written so much. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm just really impressed by the quantity of your output, and also it's high quality stuff too. Have you drawn any conclusions regarding like alien abduction or interfacing of aliens with humans? I mean, what have you noticed in your writing and your research that's kind of consistent across the board?
Well, it's funny you say I'm about to launch a new podcast with Steve Mehrer, veteran paranormal researcher, and the premise of this is that we both believe heavily that all aspects of the paranormal are connected one way or another. So you mentioned alien abductions there. What I find fascinating about those is people who experience alien abduction, particularly people who claim to have been abducted repeatedly throughout their life, they also experience events or happenings that are more in line with hauntings and poltergeist like activity, things moving in the house, electrical equipment, going haywire. Seeing shadow people is quite prevalent in these. So those are the kind of things that you would associate with haunting. So it kind of makes you think, well, it certainly makes me think, how many hauntings are actually alien abductions and things of that nature? And are these things connected? It's almost as if, what we see as aliens, UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, cryptid creatures, they're just a different manifestation from the same source. And so what I think the question needs to be is, well, what is that source and where does it come from? In terms of alien abductions, again, like the UFO sightings, I don't think it's a bunch of crazy people just shouting rubbish. I believe that something definitely has happened. But this is why the UFO subject is so interesting. There's so many possibilities. It could just be that these aliens are, perhaps, if we see, if we, how we would treat a lower life form, for want of a better phrase, that they're just coming to experiment. They want to see how we work. They're studying us, things of that nature. Then you throw into the mix rumors of possible deals back in the 50s with President Eisenhower. And again, we treat these with caution. But there's a lot of documentation to suggest, not necessarily to prove, but to suggest that these meetings, at the very least, did happen. So, is this why America in particular, from the second half of the 20th century onwards, is clearly the most advanced country in the world, across the board, really? Again, is that human ingenuity, or is that the result of alien technologies gifted to them that they then gifted to certain corporations to develop? But yeah, I think alien abductions are definitely real, even if the the heart of it turns out to be something more mental, in terms of, not a hallucination, but something of that nature, a paranormal kind of like a paranormal manifestation from the mind. But I do think they're very real, and I think the people who are experiencing them certainly think they're very real. As I say, that the effect on people's lives in cases is catastrophic. Really, certainly not something that somebody would bring upon themselves.
Yeah, you got a really good point there, because I've thought of this too. The fact that, and we're not alone in this, that maybe the alien abduction phenomenon maybe isn't physical, but yet these images have been projected into people's heads. In other words, they're still coming from an external source, but maybe if you watch somebody being abducted, they'd just be sitting in a chair, but in their mind, it's like, but still, that's something going on.
Absolutely. I mean, and that kind of makes a lot of sense, because how many abductions happen, for example, where say a person's abducted and the spouse just stays asleep next to them. There's loads of reports of that nature saying, they didn't see anything, they just remained asleep. Now, some people have said that they've been incapacitated by said aliens, so they don't react. But then, then you think, okay, well, how come nobody saw the UFO over said property and things of that nature? There were a few cases from the 70s, exactly what you just said, where a woman was abducted from her vehicle, yet people swore that she never left the vehicle. But to her, she said she was on board a spacecraft and she had experiments performed on her, etc., etc. Now, either she imagined that, or as you say, thoughts were placed into her mind, or I've heard suggestions, theories and suggestions that alien abduction could be similar to astral projection and out of body experiences, where the soul, for want of a better word, but as we would understand it, is taken from the physical body. It is taken, but the physical body stays where it is, and this soul it goes to like another realm of existence. And whether we see that as a spaceship or a medical type room, so yeah, the possibilities are endless, and that's why the subject is so fascinating, because I think we've only just kind of scratched the surface of it, and it's such a vast subject that it takes multiple researchers and investigators. One person, it's just too big for one person. Excuse me, one person.
I'm playing with a thought recently, and I'm starting to think this is increasingly important. People look at this from a scientific point of view, and I'm starting to think that's wrong. This is a social phenomenon. It's not a scientific, because the thing is, tell me if you agree with this, Marcus. I don't think scientifically you will ever actually definitively prove this. I don't. It's just like, okay, so here's an example. Our photography has gotten so advanced now that any 14-year-old kid in their parents' basement can fake anything. If you had a video from your iPhone of an extraterrestrial, a gray alien walking up to you, communicating with you, and you post it on the internet, everyone said, well, that's fake. Because the thing is, it's really, really easy to fake. I don't know if you saw this thing by Jake Barber that they showed on News Nation here, and the the country about him towing this egg-shaped object and dropping it on the ground? Have you seen this video?
I've heard this mentioned. I've not seen it. I'll be honest. No.
Well, there's a problem, and that is that video would be so easy to fake, it's almost worthless. It doesn't really, I mean, it's at this point, video evidence is basically worthless because it's so easy to recreate. And whereas conversely, you're talking about all these people who say they've been abducted, and you're right, maybe some of them didn't move, but the fact of the matter is they've had an experience, it's legitimate, they aren't all lying, regardless of what anybody says. I mean, even if you go by Stanton Friedman, the late great Stanton Friedman, he used the number of the special report 14 of the Blue Book study. They said 95% of all the things were explained. So 5% aren't. And if you go under the assumption that 95% of all the reporting that stuff that people report is either honest mistakes, people have been fooled by other people, or people who are downright lying, you still have, with 5% left, you still have hundreds of thousands of legitimate reports. That's the thing. And I'm starting to think that people are not putting enough evidence or enough credence, enough weight on actual just witness testimony, because at this point it's worth way more than photography. I mean, Christ, anything can be faked anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I was speaking to this with someone the other day, actually, that we were talking about disclosure, and I was saying that exactly like you've just said, even if the government held a press conference and here's these videos and photographs and it's all true and blah blah blah, I don't know if people would believe it. And I think the government are partially to blame for that, because of the decades of secrecy. So there's mistrust that that's just built up and up and up. But there's an old saying, isn't there, that people won't believe UFOs are real until a UFO lands on the White House lawn and an alien addresses the nation. Well, that's probably more true than people actually think.
You're right. You're right. If that legitimately happened, people wouldn't believe that.
Well, and like you say, anything can be faked. So unless you're literally there and seeing something with your own eyes, you kind of have to question everything, because, like you said, it's rampant right now, and it's only going to get worse. Going back to the science point, I agree with you in part. I think science, as it stands right now, certainly won't get fully to the bottom of the UFO and alien mysteries. And I do feel that there needs to be closer collaboration between science and not necessarily a spiritualist movement, but, as you say, just people that experiences, people who have just got suggestions because they've researched this stuff and they're not necessarily scientific. But I do think science has a part to play. I mean, you'd like to think as we progress, whether it takes decades or whatever, that scientifically we'll understand more. And the more we understand, obviously, possibly these kind of things might make more sense. But yeah, certainly as it stands right now, there's too much one side and too much this side, and they kind of need to come together and look at it look at the whole together, basically, and then I feel that we could probably make some progress.
You wrote an article in Mysterious Universe just this week about the moon, and I find this really fascinating, because the thing is, you brought up, and the statistics, as you mentioned in the article, the moon seems too good to be true. And this is one of those things where people will say this is absolutely preposterously nuts. But when you did this in your article, when you go through the statistics, and there's also a few things you didn't mention too. I bet it's absolutely fascinating. First of all, like you mentioned, the orbit of the moon is absolutely positively perfect, which seems completely unnatural. Secondly, it does exactly one revolution per rotation, so therefore we never see the backside of it, and that's kind of unnatural. That's the only body in the solar system that does that, if I'm right. And then on top of that, you mentioned the fact that it's like 1/400th the distance from the sun. It's like there's too many perfect equations involved here that seem complete. Nature doesn't do that.
Yeah. I mean, and like you say, it sounds nuts, the idea that, and there's loads of you'll have read in the article, there's loads of different theories as to who made the moon and why and where it came from. But there's lots of professors and people from the mainstream over the years who have made these points. That the easiest way to explain the moon, I think one of them is it's observational error is easier than actually explaining how it got there. So yeah, I mean, if there's any truth in that, if there is any truth in the fact that the moon, whether it was somehow brought here or whether it was constructed, whether it's an artificial object, which a lot, and again, there's lots of evidence, NASA experiments, that have kind of would suggest that it's a hollow object. Then that kind of starts lending credence to things such as the ancient astronaut theory, and are they responsible for life on Earth? And if we're saying the moon's a product of intelligent design, you're almost then creeping into creationism territory. So you're starting to ask, well, if creationism normally you associate a God, so is it God? Well, a lot of people would say no, but so if it's not God, then what's the intelligence? And if the moon was intelligently designed, you could run wild with it. You could start asking, well, is the universe the product of intelligent design and things of that nature? So there's another example again of how you start off looking at UFOs and aliens and things of that nature, but you start drifting into so many different areas of interest and intrigue and mystery, and it's just absolutely fascinating. It certainly is a mysterious universe.
Are you familiar with Patrick Jackson, who wrote the book Quantum Paranormal? Are you familiar with him?
No, actually, no, I'm not.
Well, you just said something that made me remember that remember that book, and I did read it. But the thing is, first of all, you're talking about like whether the universe is, there's a lot of scientists now that literally think the entire matter of the universe is created by information, and then there's scientists who are starting to think that it's that consciousness holds the universe open. I mean, the quantum mechanical aspects of some of this are mind-boggling. Of course, we basically just discovered quantum mechanics, so it's incredible. The one thing you mentioned in your article on the moon about the Apollo 12 experiment where they crashed the thing back into the lunar surface to get a seismic reading, and the moon rang hollow. Well, it needs to be pointed out that experiment has been replicated many times since then. I mean, the moon seems to be completely freaking hollow, and that's bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it was Carl Sagan who said a natural object can't be hollow. So,
right.
Obviously, if there's truth in that, then it's another example how it's reality altering, because everything we think we know about the moon, well, that's not true. So then you have to start questioning everything else. If the moon is a hollow object, as I say, it just opens everything up then, doesn't it? Because, then you ask him, well, how did it get here? Who brought it here? Why? What was the reason?
Yeah.
And you have to start then looking at the real possibility that there is intelligent life outside of the Earth, or not from the Earth, shall I say, who have had a major role in human history.
Yeah, you made this just in passing. You said earlier about the fact that there's a possibility that there are people like living, that some of this is coming from the Earth itself. Now, I have to admit personally, although I understand the possibility of this, I have a hard time buying it because I imagine why we wouldn't have discovered it so far. But then again, you've got Bigfoot. I mean, it's like the two theories I have a lot of people about Bigfoot people on the show. There's two theories. One is it's just an undiscovered primate, and that's not necessarily implausible. I mean, the giant squid was rumored for 2,000 years, and we didn't catch one until 2006. So, and then there's the thing about, there's a lot of people who said they've seen Bigfoot disappear right before their eyes. Stan Gordon, the famous UFO researcher, has kind of switched over to Bigfoot. That's his thing. He says he won't commit to what it is, but he says, I've had him on the show too, that there's a paranormal aspect to Bigfoot that people don't want to. And then you're talking about too, about the fact how all this stuff this paranormal stuff and this, and the UFO stuff seems to go together. Now, Patrick Jackson's book is about the fact he's an IT engineer, and his theory is that most of the hauntings in the world of physical places where people think, there's poltergeists and stuff like that, he thinks what's actually going on is there's a network of tiny little silver orbs that are flying around all over the place, and they actually take refuge in buildings. And he said his theory, it's quite complicated. I read the whole book. It's really fascinating. His theory is that the orbs actually project this kind of poltergeist phenomena to keep humans away from them, because the orbs themselves are radioactive, and if humans come in close contact, they get sick. So they do this on purpose. That's his theory. But I don't know. You have any thoughts on that? It's really amazing. He uses, matter of fact, you're probably aware of this. He uses as a primary example. There's a very famous house. I can't remember where it is, Southwick or something in Britain. Of course, I'm talking about, if you're going to New York City, say hello to my aunt.
Yeah.
but he uses it as an example. He actually camped out there and came to the. I don't know. I don't know if you've heard of this, or it's.
There's a couple. It could be East Drive, and there's also the Enfield House.
Yeah, it is the Enfield House. That's right. That's what it is. Right. Thank you. Yeah. Say hello to your aunt.
I mean, I think there definitely is a connection. I agree with him to a point. I think where I would differ is, I would say, rather than actually trying to keep people away, if anything, I believe that these things require human energy. Now, what I'm about to say sounds literally like the plot line from the film Monsters Inc., the kids' film. But there's a lot of people that say, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's a ghost, a poltergeist, aliens, or whatever, that human energy, particularly negative energy, is kind of what gives it its power. Now, a good example of this is people. Now you say Bigfoot. There's not really any not many accounts of people being attacked by Bigfoot, although there are some. But cryptids, for example, like there's a lot of dogmen reports in the United States, particularly. Like literally not werewolf type creatures, but similar. And loads of people have reported seeing them, being chased by them, but none of them have actually been attacked. It's almost like at the point of the attack, these creatures just disappear. Now, anything in nature that is on the hunt, it will finish the attack. It will kill.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen in these type of situations, and it's almost as if what it requires from these people is that negative energy, that fear. It's almost another good example is in poltergeist activity. The activity almost gets more intense the more people are kind of becoming scared of it, and it's almost as if that negative energy is feeding this entity. And that's why there's a good possibility why all these things could be connected. They could just be different manifestations from the same source, and for whatever reason that we don't understand, human emotion, human energy, fear, hate, things of that nature, it kind of makes them stronger. Poltergeist activity sometimes, or almost always, should I say, revolves around a particular person, usually a young person whose emotions are kind of all over the place anyway. And that's been really pretty well documented too, although they don't know why that is. I think if anything, I think it's the opposite. I would say that these manifestations, whatever they are, they kind of require human energy to exist and to manifest. And of course, that would suggest that there's not really a benevolent end to this. If that was the case.
That's a really interesting observation about the fact that poltergeist activity gets worse as people get more afraid. I know you're right, but I've never actually thought of it that way before. Thank you. That's very good. You're talking about, well, yeah, you're a very good guy. You're talking about motivation here. Now, here's my deal with this. Like people are wondering why are they coming here? Why are they doing this? Like just like you were saying, if my contention is if we had the technology to do this, we would be doing exactly precisely the same thing.
It's possible. I mean, we've kind of done it to ourselves. We've certainly done that way. We've acted that way with animals and such. So you would think, as you say, for example, we had technology to travel the vast distances of space, and we found a planet that had life on it. Now, the first thing we'd do is similar to, I guess, what you would argue UFOs are doing here. You would scout out the planet. You would see what's going on.
Yeah.
Are these guys going to be a threat? Are they likely to attack us? And then if it was to prove to be the case that they were inferior, for want of a better word, and they weren't really a threat, well, how would we act? History tells us that it wouldn't necessarily be the right way, and we would probably go all guns blazing for what we could take and what we could get. But I think you're right. I think there's certainly an argument to be made that if aliens are visiting us, or whatever they are, and the reasons that for doing so are, not beneficial to humanity, then yeah, they basically are sizing us up, and that's concerning, obviously, if that is the case. I kind of get the impression, though, I mean, if we accept that this has been going on for thousands of years, likely for as long as humanity has existed, you could argue, that there's much more of almost a permanent agenda here. Like if you accept that they exist in another dimension, and again, even science, mainstream science accepts that other dimensions exist, uh, you know, then it's almost like they kind of need us to survive, to exist themselves. It could be all manner of things. But I mean, the idea of interdimensional beings, I mean, humans only see a small percentage of the visual spectrum. There's stuff going on all around us that we just literally cannot see. And so again, these beings, these UFOs, that they could be here all the time. It's just every now and again we happen to see one.
It is, if you look at it from another civilization's point of view, like you're saying, you're talking about basically a 10 to 20,000 year investment in something, you know. And then the other thing is too, and I'm harping on this constantly about the fact that we're not probably talking about one single species. We're talking about not only a whole bunch of different species, but they're probably in all sorts of different phases of development. You're talking about species anywhere from 200 to 2 million years ahead of us. You know, if you're 2 million years ahead of us, you can walk through walls and it's no big deal. And, if you're 200 years ahead of us, well, you're spewing there's fire out the back of your spacecraft. I mean, so it's just like that's the other thing too. Is that we're not talking about a monolithic entity, but I agree with you. Somebody seems to make a very long term investment here, and I don't know if that's because they started this whole thing. If it's genetic, or if they stumbled onto us and decided we were worth a time, or I have no idea. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, and both of those could be true. As you say, it could be that they were stumbled upon thousands of years ago. I mean, the legends of the Anunnaki, again, depending on how you take them, suggest that we were created. We were created to be a worker race, to mine for gold. And what's interesting about that is we still kind of have this obsession for gold today, and that could be something ingrained in us for reasons we don't even understand. So yeah, I mean, and again, we're not necessarily talking about one civilization. We could. I think it was Paul Hellyer that said that he knew of at least, I think, between 4 and 12 different alien civilizations visiting or had visited the Earth. Perhaps the Earth is special, but we haven't found any other planet that life exists on. Certainly not that we know about. So perhaps the Earth is just unique, and maybe that is what attracts these entities here. It could be more unique than we think. But yeah, I mean, there certainly seems to be more than one civilization, is what we'll say, that are visiting here, and it does seem to be a long-term kind of project or program, and yeah, they could very well be more intertwined with humanity than many people would think.
I'm glad you brought up Paul Hellyer because this gets back to my thing. So here's a guy, him and Haim Eshed from Israel are probably the two highest ranking officials, quote unquote, real officials on the planet who said the aliens are here. And so these guys were extremely well, Mr. Hellyer's passed. Mr. Eshed's still with us, if I'm right. Although I think he's in his 80s at this point.
Yeah.
Like, why don't people believe them? It's like, that's the thing I don't understand. So you got two guys. He was the defense minister of Canada. Eshed ran the Israeli space program, is still the single most prominent astronomer in Israel. And both of these people said they know for a fact that this is happening, and no one's really paying any attention. I don't know. It's like,
yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, it goes back to what we said about like people just don't necessarily believe it. It's too outrageous for them. And I think if you remember back, when I think it was just before the Grush statements, but it was around the same time, following the confirmation that the Tic Tac UFO video was authentic, and the insinuation that it wasn't a military aircraft. and there was kind of like memes going around the internet saying, things to the effects of the government's just admitted UFOs are real and nobody cares. And that was the case. And people said, well, it's because of the pandemic and things of that nature. There's so much more going on. But yeah, I mean, it's not, people say, well, where's the proof? Where's this? But as you said, it's all around us, really. People have, there's numerous whistleblowers, numerous people, numerous leaked documents that found their way into the public arena. There's lots of information out there available for all of us to see. But yeah, I just feel, and again, this could go back to disinformation. This could be. It's well known, for example, that intelligence agencies work quite closely with Hollywood on certain films in an advisory capacity. But if you're kind of drip feeding the notion to people that UFOs, it's all nonsense, it's all science fiction, that kind of becomes ingrained in the human psyche. So that could be part of it as well. It could be a very well orchestrated psyop type mind control operation that's gone on for decades. That is kind of just like sets the brain to a default setting that UFOs are not real. But yeah, I mean, people have said this stuff. Hellier is a great example, and it just
Well,
kind of falls on deaf ears.
you also mentioned just in passing Ingo Swann too, or maybe that was in an article you wrote. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So the thing that fascinates me about this guy and this whole thing is the CIA has pretty much acknowledged that this program of remote viewing not only existed, but that it worked. And
Yeah.
that's a pretty freaking amazing thing. I mean, you're talking about people literally projecting their psyche out into space. I mean, and they have said that this works.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right, absolutely, and it's again, this is scientifically carried out. It's been reviewed as authentic, and yeah, I mean, and it's worked on a range, on a wide variety of experiments, from people being able to read a letter in, say, a room that's 2 doors down from them, to being able to view things in a building which is hundreds and hundreds of miles away. In the case of Ingo Swann, I mean, they had him, and again, this is on authentic declassified documents. He remote viewed to Jupiter, and he reported back seeing certain things and told information about a planet that wasn't even known to astronomers until several years after the fact. So again, the guy's genuine and authentic. So I mean, because Swan also said, didn't he, that he claimed he was told to remote view to the moon, to the far side, and he claimed he saw huge glass structures, buildings, and an intelligent presence that he felt wasn't human. So if he was right about the Jupiter stuff, and Project Stargate, I believe it was what the project was called, was genuine and authentic, which it was, then maybe he did see what he said he saw on the moon. And again, that opens up everything else if that is true.
Lou Elizondo, in his recent book Eminent, he wrote that he was actually trained to do remote viewing, and I know this is, people are probably thinking this nuts because I got this backwards. I have no problem with accepting remote viewing. The thing I have a little bit of a problem is that they say anybody can be trained to do it. That's the part it's like singing. Some people are definitely better at it than others, but they say pretty much anybody can be trained to do it, and I have a hard time with that. But I don't know.
I mean, I think again, I get what you're saying there. I do. I think that's probably true. When they say I think, in theory, anybody probably can be trained to remote view. Like you say, in theory, anybody, I could be trained to become, the next best quarterback of the NFL, for example.
Right, exactly.
It's not going to happen. But if some people can be trained to remote view and they can do it successfully, then I think that, even though some people might not be able to master that, I think what that tells us is that there's so much untapped potential of the human mind, of the subconscious human mind. And it kind of just makes you think, well, what else are we capable of? I mean, why can some people see the future? And again, okay, you take these claims with a pinch of salt, but there's for as many misses, there's lots of hits where these people have said something and it's happened, it's really well documented. So again, are they accessing a part of the mind that's just, for whatever reason, whether it's just nature's done that, or whether it's more, like some kind of genetic interference that's off limits to us, but somehow they've managed to access it. If you can be trained to remote view, what I would say there again as well is, not only does it say that there's a certain power of the human mind that could be available to us if we learn how to access it, it also suggests that the intelligence operatives, certainly as part of that program, are aware of how to do this and are also aware of exactly what that potential of the human mind is. So, yeah, the remote viewing thing is certainly interesting. But yeah, I agree. I think most people probably can be trained, but I think you'll have certain people that are just more susceptible or just take to it a little easier. And that might just be that they have access to that part of the brain that most people don't.
Yeah, I'm sure you could be trained to be a quarterback, but I don't think you'd be quite as good as Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. Although you do
No,
look like a little like him.
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, he's not in New York next year, though. I don't know where he's going to be playing, but
I know you
yeah,
follow this, huh?
he's a guy. Yeah,
I
he's
follow
a
the
guy who's
Premier
got some
League.
interesting theories. You know, he's said some pretty interesting stuff, and not necessarily agree with all of it, but he's into a lot of this stuff too. You know,
Yeah,
it's
you know.
an interesting guy. Yeah, for sure.
I have to ask you about something that's relatively close to home for you, and that's crop circles. So I find this really fascinating because I mean, they're all over the world, but they do pretty much headquartered in Wiltshire, England. Do you have any idea why?
Well, it's interesting that you say Wiltshire is the place. I mean, they happen all over the world, all over England as well, but Wiltshire particularly is where we've had loads of them. It's interesting that a lot of them happen within a stone's throw from Stonehenge, for example. So, you know, what's interesting there is the ancients. They didn't build, you know, these things in random places. You know, for wherever they chose for a very specific reason. And you know, when he looks at looking at ley lines and convergence of energies and things of
Yeah,
that nature, so they obviously understood something. So whether there's a connection, um, you know, to that kind of thing and the natural energy of the earth. But I think what's interesting about the crop circles is not so much that they're forming, you know, because there's people who've claimed to have witnessed them forming. You know, I
right.
think there was a famous piece of footage and it showed what looks like ball lightning, really. But you know, he said it wasn't ball lightning; it was like a white orb, and it was just there was lots of electrical energy in the air, and it was just skimming around. And the next thing you knew, a crop circle had formed. But I don't think it's so much that, as fascinating as that is. I don't think it's the fact that they form in the first place; it's the information that they convey. I mean, sometimes there's complicated equations in there, or there's like legitimate works of art, or you know, general puzzles. You know, it's just so you can't just say it's the natural energy of the earth that is just making pretty patterns. There's actual intelligence into these things, and it's and you know clearly some of them will have been faked, but there are some that are very legitimate, and you know some of the ones with the equations and how those can be faked, I don't know. It's a little bit
Well,
beyond me.
from what I understand, though, if there's a very distinct difference between a real and a fake crop circle. The fact that those two guys did all this, that's bullshit. they're
Yeah,
not
I mean,
they're not even close.
no, you're right. I think it's something in the nodes of the crops and how
Right.
they're if you were to fake that, they would kind of snap more
Yeah.
often than not. But in legitimate crop circles, they almost seem to have almost been melted, you know, and they've bent that way. So yeah, that is my understanding at least of how you would, you know, tell a legitimate crop circle from one that's possibly a fake.
Have you ever been in one?
No, I've never been in one. No, never been in one. I've seen one from afar, and they are fascinating. But no, I mean, you know, as I say, I've spoke to people who said they've seen them formed, and they, again, to me, what they're describing is it could be just some natural process that we don't understand, but a thing that you know, and that's causing these crops
Well,
to
Marcus, I got to tell you, I don't buy that at all. They're so exact and so precise. I don't see any natural process doing this. Natural stuff is messy, and you know, it's like no. Some of these things are unbelievably precise, just like you said. I mean, they're basically
yeah,
like mathematically precise. You
yeah,
know, so no, there's
yeah.
no
That's the point I was going to say. If it was just a case of, you know, they're making nice little patterns and things of that nature, then you could accept that it could be something in nature we don't understand. If it is something in nature, though, it again it suggests an intelligence beyond what we understand of nature, and that again starts making us having to question just what our reality is.
yeah.
Um,
We don't know shit. We don't.
no, we don't. You're
No,
right. You're
you don't
absolutely
know.
right.
No, no. There's two these two scientists who are starting to think that consciousness in the brain results from a quantum process regarding something called microtubules. I don't quite understand this. Apparently, it's quite complex, but they say that they kind of have actually, this will be my last question too. And this, talking about the fact that we have different civilizations that might be coming here. Have you ever thought about the fact that maybe different civilizations also don't evolve the same way we do? I mean, we might be late to this quantum mechanics party. You know what I mean? I mean, why there's no telling that any one civilization would discover stuff in the same order we did. Maybe the fact that we don't know how anti-gravity works is just because we're just plain freaking stupid and missed it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I mean, I agree. I mean, the fact that by definition, these intelligences are alien to us. So they might not. They certainly might not evolve in the same way, in any way. So I think. How do I word this? I think when all's said and done, basically, I think we're going to find that if we get to the answers of the UFO and alien mysteries, it's going to shed a light onto all of the aspects of the paranormal. I do think that everything is connected one way or another, and yeah, I just feel that once we solve one area of this, it'll shine a light on many others. One thing I will say is, you mentioned it's come up quite a few times, is quantum physics, quantum mechanics. I was speaking to another researcher a few days ago, and he said, and he's probably very, very accurate, that at the end of the day, quantum physics and quantum mechanics and understanding those things is going to be crucial in understanding such things as UFOs, aliens, ghosts, because it's all to do with energy and frequency and vibration and how we perceive those things. So I think the fact that quantum science is progressing as fast as it is right now, and people are becoming more and more aware of it, is a good sign, because it's probably going to lead us in the right direction.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. Marcus, I'm going to let you go. This has been absolutely fascinating. I hope we can do this again. I really do.
I'd love to.
Love having you on. And good luck with your podcast. Let me know how that's going. We'll keep in touch, okay?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. I will do. Thank you ever so much. I appreciate it.
I do too. Thank you so much. You take care. We'll see you. Hi all, Jim Peters again for Conch News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conch News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register. You don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this, because when you check out Conch News at conch.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old-fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up-to-the-minute news from 75 high-quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of the stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conch.com, CONK.com. Conch News. All right, we want to thank Marcus Lowth for joining us there from Britain. That was fascinating. I was talking to him when we were wrapping that up. He writes an enormous amount of stuff. I'm actually fascinated by guys who do this. Our friend David Stramo at Hot Air, I think David writes like 30 pieces a week, and it's not that I can imagine him cranking that out. I can't imagine cranking it out and being that good. I told Marcus the same thing. I mean, he's a very good writer. And you go to UFO Insight. He's got an article. It's the latest article at mysteriousuniverse.org. Right now, he writes for about a half a dozen publications. He said he's the editor-in-chief of UFO Insight. And yeah, the guy's, he's obviously been doing this a long time, very, very knowledgeable, and what I was talking about with him, and he totally agreed with me. And this is what, You have to understand this. The aliens are here. I can't put it any other more blatant thing. The amount of circumstantial evidence that this is happening is mind-boggling. Matter of fact, we're actually doing a little project where we're going to address that. Excuse me, itching my nose. About the fact that you can't get away from it. I mean, at this point, you you can talk to your blue in the face about the fact that all these hundreds of thousands of people that report this stuff are lying. No, they aren't. I will even grant you that most of them, if not lying, are mistaken. I mean, that was in the interview. If you heard that, I go under the axiom that Stanton Friedman used to use years ago about the fact that 95% of all UFO reports are either mistakes or hoaxes or liars, one or the other, that or one of the three. That's true. I will grant that. But the problem is the 5% that's left. You're still talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of reports. So it's like, no, something's going on, folks. And I think people are starting to slowly realize that, So, any rate, like I said, the tonight's show is pre-recorded, so we're not taking any calls or anything. So I thought I was going to leave you because I have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy. I'm going to leave you with this. So there we go. I get that. So this is the roof of a grade school in Berlin, and somebody painted a giant penis on it, and nobody knows who. And then here's the kicker on all this. This is visible from space. Yeah, the satellites are going over, and the International Space Station, and they're looking down, and they can see this. And why do I find that funny? Because I'm stupid and old. That's why. That's why I find that funny. I'm just sharing stuff with you. That's what I do. Okay, so there we go. So you don't have to look at that anymore. Okay, fine. So we got a full show this week. Jeff Meyer from Kong News joined us tomorrow night. Nathan Wooster from the Epoch Times in New York City. Actually, he is headquartered in Chicago. He's joining us on Thursday night. Lee Richardson from the Brains Performance Center in Dallas is joining us on Friday night. Yeah, we're doing a Friday show, and we'll have to be taking calls the rest of this week, but not tonight, because partly because I wanted to see the president's speech. But like I said, we've been meaning to try this out for some time. It turned out I realized this weekend that tonight was a perfect time. So hopefully this runs. We've never done this before, but it'll run well. We'll make certain it runs sometime, maybe it doesn't. So at any rate, yeah. So we'll see you tomorrow night with Jeff Meyer. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Take care.